This is a video I've been trying to do for a while now, and what I wanted to talk about was my Mass Effect game. Now, anyone who knows me knows I am a huge fan of Mass Effect, and about the time I was in my Rogue Trader group, I got a bunch of my friends together, and I really wanted to play a game based around Mass Effect. At the time, everyone in my house was playing it. This was my first real place after college. And me and two of my friends were playing Mass Effect, and we were all heavily into it. And what I wanted to do was I kind of wanted to make a game, or play a game, similar to our Rogue Trader game that was going on. Now, at this time, I hadn't really played much D&D. I think this was about 2013 is when I did. Sorry. So, Mass Effect's already come out, been played through. I had already had and ended my first foray into D&D. And we were playing Rogue Trader at the time, and I really liked that system. I really fell in love with the D100 system because of its sheer simplicity. And that was the big thing about it, is that it is 2 dice. You will always use 2 dice, and it's great for that. It's perfect, it's seamless, it's almost brain dead easy. And I think I mentioned that a little bit in my Rogue Trader system, or in my Rogue Trader story. But what I ended up doing is I decided to do like a full conversion for this game, and I ended up being the one to run it again. But I ended up writing about 64, 65 pages worth of notes. I almost made my own book. Pretty much all I really did was I converted a lot of the rules. I basically took something if it was relatable, and then I copied it over. And towards the end of it, I had actually started getting out rules. Because like when I first made it, what I did was I said, okay, this is what I have so far. I've got the races, because that was the only thing that I really needed to add, because Rogue Trader doesn't have races, and it just has humans. It does have a few, the Kroot, the Orc, and I think there's one other that I can't remember off the top of my head. But for the most part, you're mainly all just humans, and it's your class which is more important. So I wrote up some race things, gave each race like 3 benefits, and the story I ended up telling was basically that I put this setting about 1,000 years after the Reaper incident, or after the main story of Mass Effect. I think about the time that Andromeda is going to be picking up. I'm not sure. I haven't really read too much into it. All I know is a general idea of the story, and I think it takes place about 1,000 years after. But basically what my mindset was is, okay, after 1,000 years, the landscape is going to be a lot different. Just the landscape of the galaxy. It's going to be enough time, theoretically, that they can rebuild the relays, but not so much time that humanity is going to be completely extinct. I mean, it could, but it's doubtful. I mean, we've been around well over 2,000 years, so 1,000 isn't that much to be concerned about. But I set this scene 1,000 years later, also to allow for a few political things. And basically what I ended up doing is having, at some point in that 1,000 years, after the galaxy had sort of rebuilt, sort of mellowed out, after there was a decent amount of time of peace, is that the races of the story basically split into two. And the reason I did this is because in Rogue Trader there's humans and there's Xenos. So humans and everything else. And there's a lot of it's mainly in the life path, but there's a bunch of things that specify interacting with a Xenos or Xenos technology or something along those lines. And I needed something to use those. I could have just changed it, taken that line out entirely, but that would have been a lot more work for me. So what I did is I basically just took any of the minor races, and I said that they got angry and they left the council. They just completely, we're not going to deal with you anymore. And that's things like the Volus, the Batarians, Elcor, Hanar, and I've done this video 3 times, and every single time I can't remember this fucking race's name. It's the beast. I think they worked for the Blood Pack. They were like the very bestial race that worked for the Blood Pack. I want to say it started with a V. I can't remember off the top of my head. But whatever, that's not important. Basically, I just took every race that essentially didn't have representation on Shepard's team. So on one side, it was Turians, Solarians, Asari, Drell, Geth, Quarians, Krogans, and humans. So I think there's 8 playable races that I made. So I had those 2 separated solely for that one reason. And I basically gave an excuse that any race that was represented by Shepard felt that they had made a lot of importance and were treated as such, but all of the other minor races didn't. So they just split off on their own years later. And I actually ended up playing 2 games, 2 campaigns of this. Not full campaigns, unfortunately, but basically I got my group together and we started playing. And the first time around, it was sort of a feeling out process more than anything, because I didn't get much story in. And our group, we had this in our group. At first, I think we only had 3 people, and it was my group, my original group. And it was a Solarian engineer, a Quarian infiltrator, and a Asari adept. And one of this is one of the things that quickly made me realize how broken some of the races had become. Because the Asari adept, literally, I think at level, not really level, because they don't have levels in Rogue Traders, they have ranks, but you have experience. But the Asari adept, almost from the word go, almost couldn't fail a fellowship roll. Or not necessarily a fellowship roll specifically, but a diplomacy roll, I think it was. Because he built this character up so that she had, I think he rolled amazingly well, and he put his so he had a really high fellowship. But not only that, he put a bunch of ranks into it, he raised it up as much as he could, and his life path had a bunch of benefits for talking to people and talking with Xenos specifically. So if he was talking to a Volus diplomat in a official setting or something like that, I think he got almost 90. I think his score was almost 90, so he'd have to roll under a 90 to pass. So he'd have to roll 91 or higher to fail, which is just not going to happen. I mean, it could, but it's really not. And the reason for this was each race I gave a few benefits and bonuses, and Asari's I gave a +5 or a +10 to fellowships, to fellowship rolls of any biotic race. So the Geth were excluded from that, but everyone else got this. They got this bonus against them. And the reason for that was because there was something in on the wiki about Asari, and it was saying that how most races or almost every biological race feel more comfortable or feel attracted to Asari because of pheromones or something like that. So I took that in, I put that into the game. And that game didn't really last very long. I think it went 1, maybe 2 adventures before it ended up. The first one was I sent them into like this ice planet, and they went into these mines, and inside the mines there was a there was the other group's army, mainly Batarians and the other race that I can't remember their goddamn name. And the funny thing about this one was I have a tendency, I've realized, to introduce characters who are in a small room for one reason or another. Like, I might have mentioned before, or I know I mentioned before, my current D&D group that's on hold right now is I introduced Paco's character by him being locked up in a shed, pretty much. He's locked in this room downstairs. That's where he is. This character, we introduced one of my other friends who was living in the house. He didn't start off playing with us, but he joined shortly after, and he decided to play a Drell soldier. And I had to think, okay, so they've already touched down on this planet. They've already had sort of an introductory thing, and how am I going to introduce this character to become part of the crew on the ship? And so I basically put him in this little they come up on the mountain, they're riding their Mako, because I love the Mako, but they're riding the Mako, and it comes up on this ridge, and there's this little shack there on this ice planet. And sorry, I'm laughing to myself because what happened is they roll up to it and they don't know what's going on. They just see this little shack, and my friend who was recently out of the military, I think at the time, or he was prior military, he's like, okay, we're going to do this all tactically. We're going to line up against the door and room clearing and all that stuff. And so they kick in the door, and there's just this Drell sitting there. And the joke has always been that they come up to this little hut, and they kick in the door to some guy who's just taking a shit. That wasn't what he was doing, but that's kind of the scene I described to them, and that's kind of how they took it. But we added him, and they did a couple missions where they cleared out this mine, they took care of all that stuff, and then they went to a more deserty planet where I think there was another mine, because on the second planet there was a thresher maw. And my friend who was playing the Asari decided, okay, I'm going to go jump on the this mining laser and use it to shoot the thresher maw, which of course worked. It's a giant ass laser. But our second game was mildly more entertaining, mainly because we had more people and I was able to get an actual story going in it. And The first part of it, and this is how I've started both of my Mass Effect games, is I start off the game and I basically drop them into the last scene of Mass Effect 3, where not up on the Catalyst, not up in the Citadel, on Earth, in London, and I basically try to describe it, set the scene for them, but not give it away what it is. Luckily enough, only one other person in the group has played that scene, played that level, so it was fairly easy, and I think I described it poorly enough that it didn't click immediately to him. So I describe it. It's like, okay, you're in this city, and you've been tasked with getting a weapon. You see off in the distance, you see the Reaper. It's there. You see gunfire shooting, and you've been tasked with going and getting this weapon. And it's the sighting laser for the ships. So you know how at the end of Mass Effect 3, the last real mission you do is you're hunting down or you're trying to find a laser to sight in the entire Navy, I guess. Basically, the entire all of the ships, and you need them all to sight in on the same spot. Is how I remember it. It's been a couple years, but basically, I had them doing that, and the first time around I did it, I did okay. It wasn't too big, but they quickly went through it and got it, shot the thing. That's that. The second time around, they took a little more trouble. I also made it a little more difficult and mixed things up a little bit. So they're going through and they see I want to say it's a brute. It's been so long since I played Mass Effect, I can't remember these names. But I want to say it's a brute, and that thing almost kills them. And then shortly after, a Banshee shows up. And because it was the first session, I wasn't really going to kill any of them. But it puts up a good fight for them. And right at the end, I do this thing where the Reapers noticed you guys. You're putting up enough of a fight that it knows you're there, and it actually, I don't even think I said that. I think I just said it shot its laser in your direction. And what I did from there is I took the group, and I think we had roughly 4 or 5 people in the group, and I think we had 5, and 2 of them had the charm item, I think it is. Basically, when you go down one of the life paths, you get this item that says if someone is randomly being chosen, you are excluded from this random choosing. And unless everyone has it, then it's just still random. And 2 of the guys had this item. So I basically had three guys who didn't. So I was like, okay, 1, 2, 3, rolled a d6, and it ended up on my friend who played the Drell, and he was so upset by this at first, and because I basically just, yep, you are dead. In the first session, I just insta-killed him with nothing that you could defend against. I think I gave him a agility save, but he wasn't going to pass it. And the reason I did this is because in the game, they were in a game. And this is something that I didn't reveal to them until after I had completed it all. Is that what they had just gone through never actually happened. Well, it did. It was the last battle against the Reapers, but they didn't actually participate in it. They are 1,000 years later, and I thought this would be a good way to introduce the story, say here's why you guys are together, is because you've been drafted, or for one reason or another you've joined this crew, and just kind of set them out, starting out working on the same page. And for the most part, that game went fairly well. I liked the way that started out. The thing that ended it was time. Most of my friends at the time were just not willing to work out the set schedule. Just so many people would, oh yeah, I planned something, and it was just every single week. And sometimes it was the same person just 3 weeks in a row. Oh yeah, I was doing something. Oh yeah, I planned this, and which is fine. It's one of those things where if you have something to do, I don't care. If you have something else planned, cool. Just tell me. That's something I always tell my players, and usually when they do it once or twice, I'll just be like, dude, you just gotta tell me. If you have something going on, that's cool. If you just don't want to play this week, that's fine. I have no problem with that. But it sucks to see a game just completely fall apart because people don't want to say something. And that's the story of that game. I had them do a couple other things. I introduced the Thorian into the game, and as well as the Leviathan, and I kind of had it set up to where I was going to build to a Leviathan versus Thorian battle, and the Reapers were going to come back in the midst of it somehow. I was going to have something along those lines, but I was trying to sort of set the crew against itself, where some people were being controlled by the Thorian, while others were being controlled by the Leviathan through various ways. But the funny thing is, one of the guys actually worshipped the Thorian of his own free will. He's just like, oh yeah, sure, no, take me over, I don't care. And it was kind of funny for that. But yeah. So that's enough of my rambling. Until next time, guys. Game on.